Good morning to you all. Can I please welcome everyone to this Cabinet Member for the Built Environment Decision Day, taking place from the Walton Suite in the Winchester Guildhall. The time is 9:30. My name is Councillor Russell Gordon-Smith, Chairperson and Cabinet Member for the Built Environment. Please can I advise that this meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website. In addition, a video recording of the meeting will be uploaded in the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting. Please can I ask everybody to turn off their mobile phones and cameras, and for anybody, officers joining virtually, to turn off their cameras and mute their microphones until invited to speak. And can I ask members to speak clearly and remember to use the microphones. Right, we'll move on then to the first item on the agenda, which is disclosure of interests from members and officers in the matter to be discussed.
It doesn't appear that there are, Chair.
No?
Thank you.
Jolly good. Okay. Public participation. We have various people who wish to speak on items. Councillor Horrell wants to speak about the Mitchell Village. I think it's appropriate if you speak when we come to that item, Councillor Horrell, if that suits you.
Thank you. Yes.
And we have Debbie Harding, the clerk to Colden Common, to speak on the Colden Common Village Design Statement when we come to that. Right, well, right, so we've done visiting councillors representation, that's all right. Right, shall we proceed with the Colden Common Village Design Statement? And if Joan Ashton would like to introduce the paper.
Thank you, Chair. This is the Colden Common Village Design Statement before you today to be considered for adoption. Draft has been prepared with hard work from Parish Council, along with assistance from Winchester City Council officers over the last few years, and was consulted on publicly during May to June of 2021. The report has taken account of those representations, and a few alterations have been made to the draft design statement. And now the final version is before you for adoption. The recommendation is that we be given, the head of strategic planning be given authority to, delegated authority rather, to make manufactural collections of editing, and we're going to be working with the Parish Council to improve the quality of some of the maps that are in the document prior to publication on the website.
Right, thank you. Yes, I mean, there was an issue with the map quality, which I'm glad you've got in hand, and also about a certain area of Hacks Drive that was a discussion on whether to include that or not, and that's now been resolved. I saw that in the plan. Is there any other comments to be raised?
Nothing that's not been addressed in the report, I don't think so.
Right, okay then. Well, the recommendations, one is the design guideline policies.
Councillor Gordon-Smith, did you want to invite the...
Oh, sorry.
That's right.
Sorry, Debbie Harding, I'm getting quite carried away. Yes, sorry, yes, if you would like to speak, please.
Thank you. I'm just here on behalf of the Parish Council just to thank the officer for their help and support in getting the plan, the VDS, this far. And we also just want to thank her for the recommendation to adopt the VDS as a supplementary planning document. We note the planning, we note that there's recommended text changes and the opportunity to provide a crisper map, which we fully support. I'm just here to ask formally if we could just have some help from Winchester City Council to produce those crisper maps, because we have really struggled in that regard. And then if we could look at getting a final version, a deadline for a final version to be uploaded onto the Winchester Council website. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Adrian, is it the date of getting it uploaded? Is
Thank you, Councillor Gordon-Smith. Thank you to the speakers. Yes, we will certainly work with you regarding the map. That's not a problem. And certainly discussions have taken place with our person in our team, Beth, who deals with GIS. I think it's just a question of agreeing a realistic deadline for when we can upload it to the website, doing obviously all the amendments that we need to the map. But I think it's really straightforward. So I hope within the next 2 to 3 weeks, if that gives you some assurance. Thank you.
perhaps I might make a few remarks. I think these village design statements are extremely useful documents. Partly, well, for one reason, they represent a sort of democratic input, very serious effort into the planning process. And there's a huge amount of dedicated work from volunteers very often. And they're very important to have these as a basis going forward. And I'm become more impressed at the quality of the documents that's being produced. I appreciate with modern software it's a bit easier than it was 20 years ago, but the standards of the graphics and the content and are improving leaps and bounds compared with ones in the past. I think the Colden Common one has that virtue of being fairly succinct, which means it's more likely to be used and referred to. Some of the ones in the past tended to be very interesting travelogues and local histories, but not necessarily hugely useful for a developer or a householder. So I'm very pleased that the standard's gone up so much. And I'm happy now to move on to the recommendation. Recommendation that the design guideline policies in the Colden Common Village Design Statement, as set out in Appendix 3 of this report, be adopted as a supplementary planning document. 2, that the 2012 Colden Common BDS be revoked as the SPD following the adoption of the 2020 version. And 3, that the strategic planning manager is granted delegated authority to make minor factual corrections and editing in consultation with the cabinet member of the built environment to finalise the design guidelines and policies in the Colden Common Village Design Statement prior to publication on the council website. I'm happy to pass this recommendation and to sign it off.
Thank you. I have a copy of the document here. Shall I bring these to you at the end of the
Yes,
session?
if we can sign it. Right, in that case, we'll go on to item 2, which is the to put the Mitchell Devon Village Design Statement as an authorisation for the consultation process. And Jill Lee is going to introduce the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So yes, you've got Mitchell Devon draft village design statement. The Mitchell Devon Parish Council do have an adopted village design statement, which was last published in 2002. So it was overdue a bit of an overhaul. They started with the initial consultations back in July 2019. And they have consulted the parishioners by way of a newsletter through the Devon News, which is a sort of local distributed magazine, and on the Parish Council website. So we've been working with Mitchell Devon Parish Council, and they've now finished a draft, which they would like us to put forward for public consultation. We're anticipating that we'll do that for 6 weeks. The regulations say 4, but I think given the circumstances and the fact that most of the stuff is going to be done online and some people may have difficulty getting hold of the information, we're extending that to 6 weeks. We anticipate that that'll run between the 14th of February, finishing on the 28th of March, at which point we will then be talking to Mitchell Devon Parish Council about any responses that we get. We'll need to look at all of those. We need to make decisions, or the Parish Council will need to make decisions as to how they deal with them, whether it's amendments that will be needed to the draft, or whether it's things that they're not prepared to take on board and give some sort of reasoning for that. At which point then the finalised draft will be consulted on again. And then we'll be coming back to you, as Coldham Common have done, for final adoption. So today it's the authorisation to consult on the first draft. The recommendations set out in the report, but it is, as I said, that we go out for public consultation from the 14th of February to the 28th of March. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Horrell, you'd like to speak on this topic?
Please, thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I'm here because I'm one of the ward councillors for the Wanston and Mitchell Devon ward, and have listened to many of the conversations about the VDS over the past few months. And thank you to the officer team for their support to the parish council, who I know are keen to move forward on this. And Chair, I'd like to reconfirm a point you yourself made, that VDSs are an absolutely crucial document for villages in our district. It is their effort to represent their views and points of note to support the planning team when they are determining applications in their parishes. In fact, Chair, a VDS that goes back to 2002 is a long way out of date, and indeed we should be encouraging all of our parishes to update them, and to ask that Mr Fox's team do have the appropriate resources available to them to support parishes in this approach. It is an area of work that I think is hugely important. And Chair, the other element I'd like perhaps for you and Mr Fox to pass back is the importance of them when planning applications are determined. One of the frustrations for parish councils is that they make huge efforts to produce these documents and then don't feel that they are noted by the planning team when applications are determined in their wards. And so, Chair, if you could reinforce that message with the officer team looking at applications, I think parish councils would be hugely encouraged to continue on the journey with BDSs and for them to be actioned. Chair, I ask one small point of clarification. The consultation period goes outside of PERDA. Does that make a difference? If it had been the 4 weeks, it would have been completed before. I'm just checking with you and the officer team that that has no impact on this process. And Chair, I absolutely confirm my support for the efforts that the parish have made in the VDS going on to the next stage and for consultation and hopefully adoption in the very near future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Horrell. Some very useful points there. Adrian, this issue about the PERDA.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the consultation is going to start obviously before PERDA. It goes obviously into but the fact it's actually started, it is only a consultation process, similar to what we did with the strategic issues and priorities document, where we started the consultation before the pre-election period. So now we're fine to continue. I think, as my colleague Jill has pointed out, it's good to run it for 6 weeks because of obviously all these uncertainties. So, but we're absolutely fine running it into the PERDA period. And just finally, on the point you made, a very valid point about making sure that we obviously use the documents. I think it's a very good point. I think too, we have a responsibility in my team to make sure that we email them relevant DM officers once we've obviously approved the documents for obviously use to obviously highlight to our colleagues in other departments who may not be so close to it that obviously all this work has gone on and this one's been adopted. So I think that's a very valid point. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Adrian. I think that I have noted the point that Councillor Horrell made about these documents being respected in planning decisions. I think, though, there is a two-way process here, because some of the earlier village design statements, as I said, were wonderful travelogues, local histories, but were rather weak on what the local people considered as acceptable in terms of development and the real nitty-gritty bolt-on stuff that's needed to really to be useful to planners. I've written a slight critique on Mitchell Devon, which I will pass on to the officers. But I mean, there's statements made saying new development should respect the village pattern. And I think you need to try to pin that down. They need to try to pin that down, exactly what they mean by that pattern. Otherwise, you know, with the tighter you can get with any planning policies, the more, the less argument there can be about them. And you know, if you want to protect a view, for example, as you get many up at Mitchell Devon, I think you need to be very specific about the particular views and why they're important. You know, if you try to protect everything, you end up protecting nothing. And that's the big problem, to make the documents as useful as possible. The South Downs National Park are producing a model for these village design statements. And I think that model or template will be very, very useful to help people understand what's needed. I mean, I've noted that nearly all of these village design statements are very well written, and they're obviously written by people who know how to write coherently and so on. But the problem is, I don't think that necessarily such people have a great grasp on graphics and trying to explain stuff with photographs. You know, it's just very often a slightly specialised skill. But I'm sure Adrian and his team will try to do that as best they can. Right. Are there any other comments from? Right, in that case, let's move on to the recommendations. And these are that the draft revised Mitchell Devon Village Design Statement be approved for public consultation. 2, that the Strategic Planning Manager is granted delegated authority to make minor factual corrections and editing in consultation with the Cabinet Member for the Built Environment to finalise the design guidelines and policies in the design statement. 3, that the Strategic Planning Manager is granted delegated authority to undertake a 6 weeks consultation period on the design guide between the 14th of February and the 28th of March in accordance with the requirements of the Local Plan Regulations 2012. And I'm happy to sign that off. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon-Smith. I don't know if you just want to confirm that we've concluded the business for the morning.
Yes, I think we've now covered all the items in the agenda, so I think we can close the meeting and go about our appointed duties and tasks. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much to the officers for the hard work you put in and the guidance to helping the people in the villages and parishes produce some really splendid looking documents and useful documents. Thank you.
Thank you.